And so hopefully, as you've been going through these solar harvests times, these thresholds, these houses, that you have made notes or remembered and felt experiences and understood, you know, where you're at, right? Where is the sun? Where am I? So I think that that's one of the values that I think this this program can offer. And so I just want to really solidify that. So in this, let's just place this here from the Book of Houses. Each person has a different cycle. By becoming aware of our own personal cycles, we gain understanding of inner forces that before may have seemed quite mysterious. What is particularly helpful is the realization that not only is each month of the year-ish, right, different, but there is an order to these changes and a natural progression. I called this progression the harvest cycle because it is an hour. Oh, that's funny. I don't think that's what it says, because it is an hour legit to us, the growth of a plant. It is, you know, basically, what's that word? Anyways, it's the same as the growth of a plant. It begins each year with choosing seeds of what you will hope to grow in the next year to come, and climaxes in the time of harvest, when a time when your wishes come true. And that's by Robert Colin Paul Williams, The Book of Houses. So just kind of placing that in here. Now, I provided some, you know, new, you know, fun templates, modern looking templates to put in your solar harvest cycle. Of course, within the Book of Houses, it's essentially this same situation. You can place that in that book of yours. And of course, if you haven't done the solar harvest yet, you look at the bottom of your astro-charts.com natal chart, and you'll find this outline that shows all of the thresholds for the houses 1st through 12, when you know, the degree and sign in which it moves into the next house, so that you can fill those out. And then I've been looking at, and this will become more part of I think these house reflections as we move forward, but I picked up a book recently at a used bookstore down in, or out in, on my adventures, and it's called Experiential Astrology. It's written by Babs Kirby, who's a psychotherapist and astrologer, and she works with a combination of humanistic and transpersonal psychology along with astrology, which is very fascinating to me. And she's the vice president of the Faculty of Astrological Studies in England, or was when she wrote this book. And she says the sun journey helps to put in perspective the issues currently going on in our lives, giving us an opportunity to know from the core of our being what really matters to us. Those who express the solar principle, their solar principle, emanate a certainty. They come across as genuine, so others have confidence in them and trust them. And one of the things that I think this solar harvest cycle, as we like listen in and experience it, can offer us is confidence and presence where we are, right? Where the sun is where we are in some way. So kind of like, what are we doing here? The sign-oriented key inquiries is what I'm interested in doing here in this coaching class. So what are we doing? We're exploring, reflecting, imagining, expressing, defining, describing, creating, honoring, investigating, and hopefully illuminating, in order to receive and surrender perhaps to some of the ways that astrology speaks to us, and we experience astrology as an evolutionary tool. Okay, so let's get comfortable. Before we go into, I'd love for you to sit tall, get into a place where you're comfortable. Maybe plant your feet and find your breath. You might put your hand on your heart, or find a nice place to rest them where you're either touching your body, or, yeah, usually your body, your thighs, your heart, your belly. You might hold your own hand in your lap and just breathe for a moment. Kind of arriving here in this space, in this now. And giving yourself permission to do whatever comes after this, however it comes through, without judgment. Remembering that these reflections and explorations that you might define or describe here in these pages before you are yours. And it's your right to keep them to yourself or to share them. And that this is information, just information. And I encourage you and invite you to write, draw, doodle, whatever comes to mind when I ask these questions, even if it seems random or unrelated, even if it seems like processing some thing that happened today or months ago or years ago. Just allow it to be what it is and get that data down, get that reflection down. And just allow it to be what it is. And don't question it right now. There's time to connect deeper with it later, or you never know, it may make sense even 3 days from now. So just coming into a place of non-judgment, honoring yourself in your process, and following the breath. So let's begin. We're going to begin where the harvest cycle begins, in the 11th house. So you might close your eyes to imagine what your 11th house might look like before writing. You may not. You might have already a very distinct knowing of what that house is for you. So these are the cities, perhaps, the friendships, the social spaces, right? These are collaborative spaces. They're spaces where innovation happens. Where do you innovate, right? And that 11th house has a sign in it. And you may need to look at your natal chart throughout to find this. So once you have that sign, it may be a fire sign, it may be a water sign, it may be an earth sign or an air sign. But just allow maybe all of those distinctions to kind of float away. Maybe it doesn't have to be perfect, but what kind of spaces do you collaborate in? And what kind of collective care spaces do you involve yourself in? So sign-oriented key inquiries could be, how do you play a role in social change? How do you question authority? How do you exercise freedom? What kinds of people are your friends? What collaborations light you up? How do you choose your seeds? And just let whatever comes to mind come to mind. Do you choose your seeds with lots of thoughts, with your heart, with a lot of information from experience? Just see where, in fact, you might imagine yourself planting seeds. What kind of spaces do you choose to be, choose to make something bigger than yourself? All right. So moving into the 12th house, you might notice what sign the 12th house are for you. But you can also let that fall away and just answer these questions. Remember, it's just data, it's just thoughts, it's just feelings. But the 12th house is where it's the bliss state. It perhaps is psychedelic realms or spiritual dimensions. Could be purgatory, or when you're waiting for something like the internet to work, right? It might be prisons or confessional booths, places where we're silent and quiet. So any space of refuge, what is a space of refuge for you? Where do you go for holistic healing or rehabilitation from something, isolation? Could be your bathroom, right? Could be your car. But spaces and periods of waiting, perhaps, is what the 12th house is. Spaces where deep quiet is felt. Nature spaces with no-fly zones. Canyons and underneath waterfalls. A salt bath or hot springs. These are those spaces. And you might, I encourage you to think of what is your ideal 12th house space, even if you've never ever been to one, right? Don't let that stop you from imagining that as your house of germination, where you germinate. Meditation, ritual, ceremony, prayer. So the key-oriented or the sign-oriented key inquiries here might be, how do you turn off your mind? How do you turn off your mind? What does that actually look like? How do you surrender to your pain and suffering? What does that look like for you? What are you devoted to? How do you describe utopia? What is that ideal place that exists? How do you go to your inner world? Right? What's that portal for you? And to get a little dark, what is your addictive pattern, or what are you obsessed with? What do you do over and over in a kind of bliss state, right? To check out, how do you escape? What is your escape hatch? Positive or negative, right? Okay. Now we're moving into the first house. And the first house is the house of seeing the sun. So you might imagine just basking in the sun, being in your body. Of course, this is where we are, our body. The first house represents the body, our wardrobe, our self-identity, our ego expressions, and the physical appearance that we project. So you might think about the signs that are in this house for you, your rising sign as well. But this place is your actual body. So these inquiries are really about ourselves, our actual physical being, our basic vessel, right? Who we embody in this life, or what we manifest as. So the sign-oriented key questions here are just simply, who am I? And I encourage you to, boil it down best you can, or even think of icons, iconic things. Who am I? You might relate it to pieces in nature. Are you a sunset, a sunrise, a rainy day? You can speak in any kind of language that you'd like, as long as you get that data across of who am I? And this could be just for today. How do I show up, right? When I walk into a room, when someone when someone notices you, what do they notice first? What would you like them to notice first? Part of this is also, how am I willing to struggle? The power behind that first house. What am I willing to struggle for? How do I fuel myself? What do I feed myself? How am I authentic? How do I do that? Do I do that quietly? Do I do that loudly? It can be really simple. It doesn't have to be poetic. And to some degree, it's related to the seeds planted and the germination, right? How do I love? How do I fight, survive, or create? Are these things a struggle, or do I do them with joy? And remembering to leave the judgment. There's no right way to be or how to show up. Right now we're just feeling into how are we? How am I authentic? How do I see the sun?